Kasey, Yallaly. Okay, senior fisheries biologist with Wisconsin DNR. She's going to be talking about brown trout population trends in the upper Driftless region and adaptive management strategies to aid in population level changes. So let's welcome Kasey. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm out of the Baldwin office. I cover St. Croix, Pierce, and Western Dunn County, so that very upper portion of the Driftless area. Shifting gears a little bit, this is going to be a very heavily focused management talk, so bear with me. But I'm going to be talking about brown trout population trends and some management strategies that I'm hopefully going to be implementing to make some improvements. So objectives that I'm going to cover, just a little bit of background of the historic conditions and changes in trout streams locally within this upper portion of the Driftless area in Wisconsin. I'm going to use the Rush River as a little case history to kind of demonstrate how things have changed. You know, many of you are familiar with the Rush River, so I thought it would be a good one to highlight. Talk about some current conditions that we're seeing in these streams, and then future goals for the fishery, and then some of the steps that we're going to take to try to accomplish these goals. So just a little bit of history going back to mid-century. So especially within the last 20 to 30 years, trout populations have changed pretty dramatically. And these changes have been due to improved habitat, improved water quality and quantity, and then reduction in stream temperatures because of this improved habitat and quality and land use changes. So you can see here, I'm going to be focusing on a little tiny map. You guys probably can't see in the map, but the upper part of the Driftless area, particularly Pierce County, which is shown on the map here. So Pierce County, you can see a lot of green and a lot of blue on the map. The green is class 1, the blue is class 2, and a lot of these class 2s are probably going to be upgraded to class 1s in the near future. So there's been a lot of stocking reductions in this area, a lot of classifications and reclassification of streams because we have very high levels of natural reproduction, and that results in these very high density trout populations in this area. So diving into the Rush River in particular, but really a lot of these streams within this general area have gone through the same changes that the Rush has. But going back to the 1950s, really through the early 2000s, the Rush was supported by brown trout and rainbow trout stocking to provide a fishery. So I just pulled a few excerpts from the files going back to 1950 just to kind of illustrate where it was. And if anybody is familiar with the Rush, and didn't experience it, you know, back during the 1950s, 60s, 70s. It's pretty crazy to think that it was like this at one point. So May opening day, 1954, fishing pressure checks near Baldwin, 14 anglers contacted, over 11 hours of fishing, produced no trout. It's dependent upon put and take stocking for its reputation as a trout stream. But it did get heavy fishing pressure, you know, 33 cars counted on opening day in 1974. And things improved a little bit since the 1950s, depended on stocking, but the trout fishing was exceptionally good this year. A 14-pound, 7-ounce brown trout was caught opening day. So we do have this marginal warm water temperatures that is resulting in the stocking driving this fishery, and we had a lack of natural reproduction survival. But with that stocking and these low densities, it produced some really big trout. As you can see back in the day, a lot of big heavy fish were taken out of the Rush River from the stocking. So if you fast forward to today, we have these very cold water temperatures and much improved habitat. And this is due to land use improvements. So improved farming practices, implementation of CRP, that's resulted in increased groundwater infiltration and these higher base flows that have resulted in really great conditions for trout. So in the Rush River in particular, stocking ceased in 2007. It hasn't been stocked since. And then the Pierce County portion was reclassified from class 2 to class 1 shortly after the stocking stopped. So with these changes in water temperatures and better conditions for trout, we did undergo reduced fish forage base because of these colder water temperatures. So as the water gets colder, not as many species can handle colder water temperatures. So we get this reduction in fish community diversity. So with that though, we get really high natural reproduction of trout, high annual survival without stocking here. So current status, this is just looking at the Rush River. Class 1 streams, we have these very, very high density brown trout populations. So abundance on average ranges anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000, all the way up to 10,000 fish per mile in some cases annually. And a lot of these streams contain relative abundance of trout above the 95th percentile for class 1 trout streams in the Driftless area. So this is just fish per mile catch rates of brown trout going back to 2000 to 2023, separated out here by age class. So total trout per mile is the solid line, young of year is the dotted line, and then adults are the dashed, and then the red line is the 90th percentile. So pretty consistently, total trout per mile is well over that 90th percentile. So we've just got these very high densities pretty consistently every year. So with these high densities, compared to what it was 30, 40 years ago, size structure has changed dramatically. Fish condition is much lower because we have this change in the forage base and we have these high densities. So a smaller proportion of fish reach these larger trophy sizes than we had when densities were much lower. So this is just a length frequency distribution of brown trout in several streams. So 6 streams here. Don't worry about the different colors, but basically this is just illustrating the number of fish by inch bin. So you can see the vast majority of fish in these streams annually are within the 6 to 12 inch range, and a few fish over the 12-inch mark. But we've got a ton of fish that stack up in this range annually, and I'll get into why. So like I said, majority of fish are within this size distribution here. And we see these consistent patterns because we've got really consistent natural recruitment and reproduction in all these streams. So just in this 1 year, this is just a snapshot in time of the Rush River and Plum Creek, just for an example. But we've got 85% of fish between the 6 and 12-inch range and 87%. So a lot of fish within this size distribution here. And this is because survival and recruitment is very high, like I mentioned. So length frequency distributions, again, just a couple examples. Here's these age 1 fish in the red circle, and then the age 2 fish in the blue rectangle. So this is driven by these really consistent and high patterns of natural reproduction. So on average, our young of year catch rates are above the 90th percentile for a lot of these streams in Pierce County. So this graph shows catch rates of young of year. So it's fish per mile on the y-axis, and then going back to the year 2000 to 2024 for several different streams. So you can see pretty consistently, there is some variability for sure, but a lot of these streams are well above that 90th percentile mark for young of year catch rates. So very strong natural production. So this is leading to what we call density dependence. So these high densities of trout. So there's only so many resources in a stream or a water body to go around. When you have a ton of individuals, they're all competing with each other for those same resources. So that can lead to slow growth rates, poor condition of fish, and it can result eventually in poor size structure and then reduced maximum size potential in these streams. So this graph denotes catch rates of fish over 12 inches of brown trout. So going back similar to the previous graphs from the year 2000 to 2024. This is for several streams, but this dashed line here, if you can see in the back, it's kind of small. But it represents a moving average, and you can see a overall slight decline in catch rates of fish over 12 inches in these streams. This is some data from Kirk Olson, the biologist here in La Crosse. He used pit tags, and he was able to get the length at the time that the fish were marked and the length at the time that fish were recaptured, and determine approximate and maximum size potential for brown trout in several streams across this management area. So each colored line represents a different stream, and where that colored line intersects this 1-to-1 ratio at length of marking and length of recapture is approximate maximum size potential of trout in that stream. So you can see it intersects for some of these streams that have really high densities at a pretty low maximum size. So fish on average only reaching around 13 to 14 inches in some of these streams with high densities. So because of these factors, because of these conditions that we're seeing in a lot of these streams, current regulations don't really match with the goals that we're trying to achieve in these fisheries. So we really want to provide a harvest opportunity for brown trout and try to reduce the number of these overabundant small fish in that 6 to 12 inch range that we're seeing in annual surveys. Doing this would also improve the size structure of these populations, or at least aid in the improvement of the size structure. Also, it would help to increase densities of these fish larger than 12 inches, so the more quality or memorable size fish. And it would also help to improve overall trout condition and the growth potential within these streams. And just to provide overall higher quality trout fisheries. So currently the regulation within Pierce County is a 12-inch minimum with a 3-fish bag limit, and that's obviously no longer appropriate for these types of streams with these conditions. This is protecting the majority of fish from harvest, so it's causing stacking up of fish under the minimum length limit. It's increasing the effects of density dependence. So we're seeing slower growth, poorer condition of fish in these streams because of this. And it's also protecting young fish. So this regulation was put into effect to protect young fish until they can reach sexual maturity and try to improve the size structure of populations when they weren't as high density and we were still stocking fish. And with density dependence, fish tend to reach maturity at smaller sizes. So they'll sexually mature at smaller sizes because growth is so slow. So they'll sexually mature at very small sizes, even down to 7 and 8 inches for brown trout. And this current regulation is focusing most of the harvest on these larger individuals that are more rare in these populations. So basically what I'm proposing is to kind of flip-flop the minimum length limit. So putting on a 12-inch maximum length limit, or in other words, a 5-fish bag limit, and only 1 fish over 12 can be kept. So this would focus harvest on these abundant small trout that we have in a lot of these streams across the county. And this would aid in hopefully improving growth rates by reducing the densities of these smaller fish. It would also protect large fish, so give more protection to the fish over 12 inches, and hopefully aid in improving the size structure if enough fish are harvested. So I did a little back of the envelope calculation on the Kinnickinnick River near River Falls, near the Twin Cities metro area. So this river currently has a 12-inch maximum length limit with a 5 bag. That went into effect in 2016. Prior to that, it had a 7-inch minimum length limit. And so I compared the trout populations during the 7-inch minimum length limit and then during the current 12-inch max. And basically this resulted in a very minimal increase in trout over 12 inches and a very minimal increase in very minimal decrease in densities of trout less than 12 inches. So 2% increase of trout larger than 12 inches and reduced densities of 7 to 12 inch fish by about 5%. So very minimal results from this regulation. But this is likely due to very minimal harvest. Very few trout anglers harvest trout. A lot of anglers practice the catch and release ethic. And we know this from a creel survey that we conducted on the Rush River in 2021. So there was a previous creel survey on this river in 1988. So comparing the 1988 survey to the 2021 survey, we documented a 73% decline in trout harvest between those time periods. So back in 1988, on average, about one fish was harvested for about every 3.3 hours the anglers fished. Compare that to 2021 or today, about one fish was harvested for every 45 hours of anglers fishing. So not a lot of trout being kept out there. And this is pretty similar to creel surveys that were conducted on the West Fork of the Kickapoo and some other driftless area streams. Just to get into that data a little bit more, very low harvest on the Rush River in this survey. So 51 trout were harvested during the survey, and that's projected out to 145 brown trout for the entire season. And if you're looking at 5,000 to 7,000 fish per mile, that's not doing much. So even though we need to work to change anglers' attitudes, to just get folks to recognize that harvest isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can actually be really beneficial for the fisheries. I'm also working to change regulations to the regulations that I mentioned. So 5 trout, only 1/12 may be kept. This is going to promote the harvest of these smaller fish that are very abundant, protect the larger fish that are more rare, and hopefully promote quality and trophy potential in these fisheries. So I did consider a couple other options. A 10 bag with a no minimum, a 5 bag with a no minimum. But those options weren't really supported within my management area because they didn't afford any protection to these larger fish. So this is the regulation that will hopefully be implemented in the next couple of years. And it will include these streams in Pierce County here, all of the red streams, which includes this list here, and then the Kinney in St. Croix County as well. And with that, I can take any questions if I have time.
Yeah, you got a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Quick question on the last slide.
Sure.
Are those other streams you mentioned similar in size, structure, population?
Yeah, exactly. So some of the graphs that I showed earlier were from several of these streams. So Isabel, Trimble, Rush River, Plum, Kinney, they're all very similar in size, structure, and densities for brown trout. Yeah, Tim.
Do you have any like gear restrictions, like anything that might, if you don't have the harvest that you're looking for to influence some of your, with the regulations, do you think that maybe like gear restrictions might help you out by increasing that harvest? And then it's not harvest, but mortality.
Right.
Yet you're not,
Yeah, no, you mean currently do I have any?
Yeah.
No, I don't. No gear restrictions on there. Yeah, so all of these are just that 12-inch minimum length limit for brown trout. So yeah, no. Yeah, good question. Yeah, that's a couple of years.
So we have the same situation in Minnesota. We don't have any minimum length limit, and I completely agree. We don't have the harvest, and I don't think whatever you do with the regs is going to change that.
Right.
They're just
Totally.
This is going to happen. But kind of as a follow up, when you guys did the brown trout removal stuff for the brook trout stuff, I don't know if that was down in Kirk's area or up in yours.
Both, yeah.
Did you see a density dependent response in the brook trout growth, production?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I did it on Katy Creek, this little yellow stream here. That's not part of this reg change proposal because we're trying to focus harvest even more on brown trout and protecting brookies. But yeah, we definitely saw that in our data. I have pretty good data that demonstrates that response in the brook trout population after we remove browns. Yeah, Paul.
On the lower sections of the Rush or the Kinney, the real downstream segments, do you have characteristics of more memorable size fish and lower densities that you steer anglers to that are seeking these trophy
Yes,
structure?
definitely. Yeah. So on the Rush, below Highway 10, the size structure changes pretty dramatically. Lower density is more quality trophy size fish down there. So yeah, there's definitely areas that the anglers can target more to go for these harvest opportunities.